Good afternoon and welcome to our legislative press conference. I am Roger Batt, the Executive Director of the Treasure Valley Water Users Association. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. Standing in front of you is a coalition of legislators from the Treasure Valley representing both political parties from the Idaho House and Senate. These leaders have diligently worked on these water rights issues in the Treasure Valley, which are going to be presented before you this afternoon. The purpose of this press conference is really to educate our citizens more about the impacts of some decision-making that's been done by the state of Idaho that attacks our water rights here in the Treasure Valley. These impacts are going to be impacting our Treasure Valley community and also our water right holders who are citizens of the state. For purposes and time of holding to our agenda, and also from hearing from some of our legislators, we would like to do things in a very orderly fashion. First, we will have our first presenter will be Representative Tom Daly from District 21, followed by Senator Grant Burgoyne from District 16, and then Senator Jim Rice from District 10, and then our final presentation will be from Representative John Gannon from District 17. And then we will also follow up with some questions from the media and get you the proper answers that we will have for our conference. Press packets are also available. I believe we've handed those out to all of you. It has further information on the issues and to pertinent information. With that, we welcome Representative Daly from District 21.
Thank you, Roger, and thank you all for being here. This is an important event that we're having here, trying to accomplish basically two things. One, call the attention of our electorate and every citizen in this valley the importance of this issue, and two, to ask the Department of Water Resources in the state of Idaho to stand down in what they're doing in trying to take away our water. I guess when we talk about Idaho, and we usually talk about water, because we live in a desert. This desert that we have requires us to store water. In order to have water, we have to store water. Then, as a fifth-generation Idahoan, I'm really confident about the importance of water, what it is to store and to keep. Department of Water Resources right now is trying to take what was used as the allocation process for water over the past 6 generations, in contrary opposition to a court decision even, and take away water. Senator Burgoyne is going to get into the details of the historical precedents as far as the legal part of it. But I'd like to talk about some of the history of this valley to give us a context of it. About 100 years ago, when people started coming into this valley, they realized that the natural flow of the water in the river was not adequate, so they built dams to store the water so that we could have storage water to supplement the water flow. Department of Water Resources is now saying that that storage water, when it's released for flood control, because flood control has been part of the process over the years. We release part of the water for flood control. We release it, take it out of the storage, release it. That takes some of the water for storage. Traditionally, we've had, when the water was replaced, we could use that water. What the Department of Water Resources is now saying is, once that water leaves the reservoir for whatever purpose, it's used. Once it goes into the reservoir, it meets the requirements of the law, and then once it's released, whether it's for flood control or whatever, it's gone. So what I'd like to do is give you a couple of examples of what that means to the valley. Nampa Meridian Irrigation District, which is the largest district in the valley, it releases on a normal day about 990 acre-feet of water to fill the needs for the irrigation district. If they released, so to put that in the equation, if they released for flood control 1,000 acre-feet of water, that would take 1 day away from the Nampa Meridian Irrigation District. So if you put that in 20,000 acre-feet a year, that would be 20 days. So what that would translate into, a normal water year, when the water is going to be turned off in September, it would be turned off in August. So that means that our valley would be at a prime season in terms of heat, would be without water for our irrigators. That's not just irrigators, that's homeowners. Everyone who uses pressurized water in your home, you would also be impacted. Another irrigation district, the Pioneer Irrigation District in Caldwell. It diverts about 1,000 acre-feet of storage water a day to meet its needs. If they just released 15,000 acre-feet and charged it to Pioneer, that means that the Pioneer District would only have 43 days of irrigation water. So that means if they start irrigating in April, they'd be finished in June. They would have no water after June. Now, does this make any sense to anyone? No, it doesn't really. Again, if the Department of Water Resource prevails in what they're trying to do, this could turn off our water as early as June for some of the irrigation districts in the valley. And the examples that I've used are only a couple of them. There's dozens of irrigation districts that are impacted the same as the ones I've described, supplying over 300,000 acres of irrigated land. So as I was presenting this, kind of dialoguing with my constituents about this, because I've received comments from my constituents about this, one of the questions that one of them asked was, why are they doing this? And who's going to be beneficially impacted from it? I can't answer that question, but it's a good answer for the Department of Water Resources. Good question for the Department of Water Resources. Another constituent said, well, and, you know, they had this puzzled look on their face, and they said, okay, does this mean if I put $1,000 in the bank, and then I go to the bank and try to withdraw the $1,000, and they say, no, there's only $500 in there because we've already given that your $500 of your money to someone else. So you only have $500 now. They said, is that what you mean? And I said, well, that's a good example of what we're talking about. So again, we're here today to do two things. One, make aware our citizens of the potential impact in their lives. This valley will never be the same if this happens to us. So we need to have our people in this valley, one, understand it, and two, talk about it with everybody involved. The Department of Water Resources, their legislators, everyone they can talk about it in terms of how this is going to impact them. The second thing is we're asking again the Department of Water Resources to stand down, stop doing this, stop making us not only spend extra money from our water users to defend our water, but also don't take our water.
Thank you, Tom. I'm Senator Grant Burgoyne. I represent District 16. I'm here today for the same reason. We need to stop the taking of Treasure Valley water. Against all logic and reason, the director of the Idaho Department of Water Resources has decided to take away Boise River water rights in the Treasure Valley, many of which go back to 1911, and make them available to new claimants and downstream interests, potentially including out-of-state interests in Oregon and Washington. An Idaho court issued a decision last October 9th saying the director was wrong, but that didn't stop him from later issuing his own decision, agreeing with himself and saying he was right. The director's decision resulted from an administrative hearing for which he appointed himself the hearing officer, even though he had publicly advocated to reduce these water rights both before and during the hearing itself. At the hearing, he even appeared to help prosecute the case against the Treasure Valley water users. This denied them due process of law and resulted in a decision unconstitutionally purporting to take their water, which is property, just like a house, a farm, or a ranch. We have tried to find out why he's doing this, and all he's really told us is that he wants to keep everyone happy. We think the job of the director and the department is to protect the Treasure Valley's water, not make those who want to take it happy. If there is another agenda here, we have not been able to find out what it is. It is interesting, though, that the only disinterested and neutral decision maker in this matter, the court, decided to protect our water. Which decision will prevail on appeal is, however, unknown. The director's decisions have ramifications for every water user in this state. It essentially says that any water resources director can change a water right. That's like saying that the government can change the deed to your house and take away some of your yard, one or two of your bedrooms, or your kitchen. In that kind of environment, no one can lease, buy, sell, or use water as collateral for financing because no one can know what the water is worth. And no one in this valley can be secure that their drinking water, their irrigation water, or water for new industry won't disappear tomorrow. Whatever the game being played here is, it has to stop now. The court has issued a decision, and the director and the department he oversees need to accept and abide by it, rather than go against it, so that the Treasure Valley's water is secure. If the director won't reverse course, we appeal to the governor to rein him in, and to rein him in now. The water users in this valley will take all legal and legislative steps necessary to prevent this unconstitutional taking of their property and secure their water for themselves and for their children. Thank you.
I'm Senator Rice from Caldwell. Just a little bit of perspective. We use the reservoirs on the Boise River for two purposes. One is to control flooding. What you may not know is the building we're standing in is inside the 100-year floodplain of the Boise River. We don't get floods here because we use the dams for flood control. We also use them for irrigation. We use it to irrigate our yards, our gardens, as well as farmers' fields. We use it to irrigate our parks in Boise and every town down throughout the valley. What you have is the director has taken a position that if we want to maintain our right to the water the Constitution of the state of Idaho says we own, we can't use the dams for flood control. So he thinks we should have the choice between flooding the city of Boise, the city of Meridian, the city of Eagle, and other towns down the river, flooding homes and parks and government buildings, or we should lose our water and never be able to use it. That's not rational. And then after our Idaho courts tells the director, you're wrong. The water that the citizens in the Treasure Valley have always used, that they own, is the same water that fills the reservoir regardless of flood control releases. And now the director, a bureaucrat, wants to take and overrule the courts of the state of Idaho because he thinks he has more authority to decide the law than the courts do, and he's wrong.
Thank you, Jim. Bureaucrats should respect the decisions of our courts. This irrigation water is it saves tens, probably thousands of, maybe 10,000 homeowners in the valley up to several $100s a year because they don't have to buy processed water for their yards and gardens. It also saves our schools and our parks and other public places the same money too because, for example, in my district on the bench, Monroe and Hillcrest both use the irrigation water, and that saves the cost of the processed water. In addition, the irrigation water replaces our groundwater, especially the flood irrigation water. You know, we now have 600,000 people in the valley. 100 years ago, we didn't have water demands, but now we have 600,000 showers. We have 600,000 toilets flushing. We're using a lot of water, and we're using a lot of groundwater. And if we continue to use that groundwater without replacing it, we're going to have a problem someday. years in future generations. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the media? Yes, Sean.
What happens if the director doesn't take this advice, doesn't stand down? Is there a possible legislative solution next session? Is that a possibility?
I think a legislative solution is always a possibility. It shouldn't come to that. The director has a boss. The boss is the governor. And we certainly hope that the governor can get control of the director. This is the kind of decision that he has made is really irrational when you get right down to it. And it flies in the face of all reason. And if this can't be corrected in the normal processes within the executive branch, and the legislative branch is going to have to act. Now, part of the problem here is that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some years for the courts to deal with this issue. And what's going to happen in the meantime? If the director is proposing that he is going to immediately begin this new process for taking water away from the uses we have in the valley, then we're going to have to do something fairly quickly.
You know, just to address that though, the real heart of this problem is we have a director who claims that he can overrule the courts. Bureaucrats don't overrule courts. He needs to respect the courts. He needs to respect the court process. If he disagrees with the court, he's welcome to appeal the court decision. He's not entitled to try and overrule the court himself. That's just out of line. It's an abuse of his office.
Anybody else?
Has the legislators here heard from the director? Have you asked him to explain himself? Has he explained himself?
We sure have. And you'll remember I said that his explanation was he needs to keep everybody happy. And the problem with that, of course, is a water right is like your deed. And if there are conflicts over water rights, we have a system in Idaho for resolving them. Senior users prevail over junior users. Now, when you start saying we're going to do it on some other basis, that calls into question every single water right we have in this state.
You know, you had an article recently in the Capitol Press on that very issue, and the response out of the Department of Water Resources, I believe I have it right from your article, was that the director's deciding a different issue. I've read his opinion, and I've read the court opinion, the ruling, and they're not different. The director, in fact, is trying to make it as a conclusion of law his way when he's prohibited from deciding questions of law. So, yeah, it's excuse after excuse.
So, Sean, your question was, is the executive branch aware of our concerns, and is the director aware of our concerns? The director is very much aware of our concerns because last year when he initiated the contested case, which was never contested, he called it a contested case, but there was no one on the other side contesting anything in the case, then we asked him to please pull back on that case. That was not done. He then appointed himself as the hearing officer, which is the judge. So he has now initiated the case and laid out the case. He then appointed himself as judge of the case. And so a large group of legislators sent a letter to the governor. We went and met with the governor and let him know our concerns. That was over a year ago, and we are yet to receive a response from the executive branch. The director then appointed himself. We had the hearings in August and September, and he picked the witnesses for the case in which he initiated, that he's judging, and now he's hand selecting the witnesses. It's blatantly wrong. He's very much aware of our concerns.
You'd have to ask the director who he's trying to make happy. Because that's the one he's trying to do. But, you know, we don't want to have to legislate this issue, but if we do, we will, because it should be decided by the courts. And like I say, we've had the ruling that supports our position. And the issue is the refill water after the flood release, who's entitled to that water? And the director wants to give that water not to the irrigators who lost their water going down the river. They want to give it back to any new people that may want to get the water. And so our irrigation water that went down the river is up for grabs. And he's trying to say, well, it's just a different way of calculating and keeping track of how the water is accounted for. It's a totally non-historic way of what we've always assumed that the refill water was. And we don't have storage rights in Lucky Peak. And that gives that director the loophole of the water that's up above Lucky Peak that he's releasing. He's saying the refill belongs to somebody. He can give it to somebody else. And I think you guys can probably make your assumption of who those other people might be that he's trying to keep happy.
I would point out that we have, during the last session, we received letters of support for retaining our water from the cities. So the cities are not in favor of the director's position. You have uniformity with all of the irrigation districts and the cities on this issue. We're on the same page because it's all of us that stand to lose.
When it comes to where our water might end up, all we have to think about is that the fact that the western United States is a very big desert, and there are a lot of states with some very serious water problems. As Idaho grows, we are going to have increasing water problems within our own borders. When you put more water in the Boise River, that water reaches the Snake River. And where does the Snake go? It goes into the Columbia. And where does the Columbia go? It goes to Washington and Oregon. Now, when you start playing with our water rights, you give an opportunity for people downstream to get more of our water. It's in our interest in Idaho to keep as much of the water that we are beneficially using as we possibly can. And we are going to have, as this community grows here in the Treasure Valley, we're half the state now. We could be 3/4 of the state in another generation or two. And the demands on our water in this valley are going to become a bit of a problem for us as it is, without our director giving the water away.
You got any farmers in the group that I could ask a question of?
Yeah, got a couple.
Lou's right here.
Explain for me, if you would, the kind of problems that would create for a farmer if he loses his water 20, 30, 40 days earlier than he's used to. That's a critical time of year for farmers.
Lou McGurdio, been a family farm almost 100 years here in the valley. As a farmer and the love of the land, if we lose our water in June or July, very devastating. I mean, you're talking a huge economic impact in the valley. When ag, the amount of money that ag puts into the state coffers is huge, let alone all the golf courses, all your lawns, all the housing developments that would run out of water. So it's monumental losing that water, and historically it's always worked since Air Rock Dam come about. As far as the valley used to flood. The dams went in to hold the water to not flood the valley. And all this ground down the valley was developed and put under cultivation, and therefore the water was there to raise a crop. And so when you start looking at losing your water in June or July, very devastating. Big impacts. It's just not an easy thing to digest. I mean, I lay awake at night wondering, and I got a bunch of cows that I have to feed, and I have to raise the feed for those animals. And so when you're talking that timetable and that loss of water in June or July, very huge impact.
Sir, before you leave, would you state your name again and spell
Lou Mugurtio, Loumurgoitio. Like I said, I've been in the valley, our family has, for 100 years. Seen a lot of changes, farm around a lot of housing developments. I tell you, I've seen it all.
Well, thank you all again for attending. We really appreciate your participation. Thanks to our legislators for being here representing us on this issue and for all the great work all of you do. Thank you very much.